Hwaseong is a rural city in Gyeonggi Province, South Korea. For a period of 4 years and 7 months, serial murders took place in the area, which were chain of murders and sexual assault, where all the victims were women, and one common thing between all the murders was that in most cases, they were all strangled to death with their own clothing like socks or pantyhose. This incident sparked largest criminal case in South Korea with record-breaking 2 million man-days spent on investigation and over 21,000 suspects interviewed. Despite all the efforts of the police of that time, the case remained unsolved for 30 years, until 2019 when latest forensic technology came into play, that Lee Chun-jae was identified as a suspect. The serial murders began with Lee Won-in, age 71, going missing on September 15, 1986 when she was returning home after visiting her daughter. Her body was eventually found 4 days later, lying in a pasture. It was obvious that the killer did not put any effort into hiding his crime. Then a month later, on October 20, 1986, Park Hyun-suk, age 25, also disappeared after getting off a bus while returning home from Songtan. Her body was also eventually found, 3 days later, in a canal, and again no efforts by the killer into hiding the body. The third incident took place 2 months later of the second, on December 12, 1986, when Kwon Young-bon, age 25, disappeared from right in front of her house. But unfortunately, her body was found many months later on April 23, 1987, in an embankment. 8 more murders took place over the next years in similar fashion. On December 14, 1986, Lee Kai-suk went missing, and after a week her body was found. In 1987, murders of Hong Jin-young, Park Eun-ju, and Kim Mi-soon took place, which were quickly connected to ongoing serial murders. Then in 1988, murder of Ahn Ji-soon took place, and following that in 1989, 1990 and 1991, bodies of Kim Hyun-young, Kim Mi-young and Park Soon-ja were found that were also part of the serial murders. The Hwaseong serial murder case was very infamous in South Korea because of being the first case with truly identifiable chain of murders with a similar modus operandi. The modus operandi being pattern of attacks where the women and girls were targeted who were walking alone in secluded areas, then sexually assault them and then kill them via strangulation using victims' own pantyhose and socks. Since there was never a witness to any of the murders, but it is widely believed that the killer dressed himself in all black, wearing a hoodie, basketball cap and a mask to hide his face. The police officers involved in the investigation spent over 2 million man-days on the case, with number of suspects growing day by day, ultimately reaching a count of 21,280 individuals. In addition to that, 40,116 fingerprints were taken, along with 570 DNA samples and 180 hair samples. Initially, when the first 5 murders took place, it was within a 3.7-mile radius of Hwaseong. Police forces were divided into teams of 2, positioned every 328 feet, but the very next murder, that is the 6th, took place in the blind spot of both the police teams. The killer got away as there was no police presence. As the investigation dragged on, rumors started spreading around public and eventually reached police that the killer targeted women wearing red clothes on rainy days. This led to many female police officers wearing red clothes and going out in secluded places in order to lure out the killer into their trap, but either the killer was smart to not fall for it, or rumors were just hoaxes. After the murder of Ahn Ji-soon on September 7, 1988, a suspect sketch was drawn based on the memory of bus driver Kong and bus conductor who saw a man get onto bus shortly after the murder. The culprit at the time was described as a thin-framed man in his mid-20s, height about 165 to 170 centimeters, no double eyelids and a sharp nose. Police also suspected that the killer had a type B blood, but when the killer was eventually caught in 2019, blood type was O. This proved that the investigation team of the time was nowhere near the killer. There was also a survivor of the serial murders named Lee Jiamran, aged 36, who was attacked by the killer sometime in 1986. She described him as skinny with a low voice. Police finally found a lead with a forensic test of a hair sample collected from crime scene which showed 40% match with a man named Yoon Sung-yeo, a 22-year-old man who was arrested on July 27, 1989. According to the reports, he admitted guilt of murdering of Park Sang-hee, but this case was later deemed a copycat crime. Although Yoon was imprisoned for life, it was later when real culprit was caught that the real truth came out and Yoon was proven innocent. All this brings us to the actual killer and culprit behind the Hwasong murders, a man named Lee Chun-jae, born in Hwasong, Gyeonggi Province on January 31, 1963. According to her mother, he was well educated and worked well with others, although he had a trauma of his brother passing away due to drowning. After graduating high school in 1983, Lee went for his military service and served as a tank driver, ultimately getting discharged in 1986. In 1990 he began working as an unlicensed crane operator. Lee married a bookkeeper and also had a son, although he had a history of domestic violence and often beat his wife and children. Lee broke into a house in Suwon on September 26, 1989 and was sentenced by Suwon District Court to 1 year and 6 months in the first trial. After the first trial, Lee filed an appeal, claiming he was beaten by an unknown young man and only broke into the house to escape. In second trial, court suspended Lee's sentence to 2 years probation and was released in April of 1990. Lee Chun-jae was identified as a suspect in the serial murders case on September 18, 2019 after the DNA from an underwear of one of the victims was matched with his. Subsequent DNA testing linked him to another 4 murders. When he was identified, he was already serving life sentence in prison for murdering his sister-in-law in Busan. Initially, Lee denied any involvement in the killings, but on October 19, 2020, he confessed to killing all the victims of serial murders, which included the copycat crime and 4 more murders that were not attributed to serial killer. The details of these 4 murders are not available as of yet. Lee also confessed to more than 30 sexual assaults. Police expressed that Lee had a weak self-esteem due to his introverted personality but experienced a sense of accomplishment and self-reliance for the first time in his mandatory military service, which led him to commit sex crimes to express his frustration caused by his monotonous life following his discharge from the military. The provincial police chief stated that Lee displayed psychopathic tendencies by being unable to empathize with the victim's pain and suffering and continuously showing off his crimes. So, finally this Hwasong cold case can be put to rest as solved, after almost 3 decades, but wait, remember the copycat crime? For which Yoon was arrested and imprisoned. After Lee confessed that copycat crime was also his doing, the world finally had the truth in front of their eyes that Yoon was an innocent man all along. When Yoon was initially sentenced to life in prison, he appealed the ruling, alleging that police coerced him into giving false confessions through torture. Multiple people, including Yoon, who had a limp from childhood polio and hadn't finished elementary school, accused police of using torture during the investigation. It is true that the Korean police of the past were known to use dirty methods to get their work done, even if it meant sending an innocent man to jail. Sure, the police were eager to solve the case and stop the murders, but that does not mean sending an innocent man to jail. In July, Gyeonggi-nam Police Agency Chief Bae Yong-ju admitted that during the initial investigation in 1989, police assaulted Yoon and coerced him into making a false confession. An official document noted that a witness was present during Yoon's confession, but Bae said that was not the case. But the police's incompetency does not end here. In the re-trial of Yoon, where he was declared innocent, Lee said that he did not think he can get away with the crimes, as he never tried to hide his crimes. He would bump into detectives all the time, but nobody ever suspected him. Police even questioned him for different matters, but he was never under the radar. It's scary how the real killer was always there, right under the noses of the detectives, and yet they were never able to catch him. Lee apologized to the family members of his victims and Yoon, saying he heard that many people had been investigated and wrongfully suffered. He'd like to apologize to all those people. He came and testified and described the crimes in hopes for the victims and their families to find some comfort when the truth is revealed. He will live his life with repent. Lee cannot be prosecuted for the serial murders because statute of limitations has expired, but he will remain forever in jail for murder of his sister-in-law. In the end, Yoon served 19 years in jail until he was acquitted of murder on December 17, 2020. He is a free man now who cannot get his years back, but as he said in his own words, he wants his honor in the society back and live peacefully as an innocent man. The revelation of the real culprit not only helped the family of the victims get closure but also helped an innocent man like Yoon get justice and shed a light on incompetency of the authorities who did not think twice before sending an innocent man to jail. Lastly, these are the different dramas and movies which takes inspiration from the case and were made in hoping to keep the memories of the victims alive so that we never forget about them, so that one day the killer can be caught. Finally, this 3-decade-long mystery or cold case can finally be put to rest. Hey guys, hope you liked this video. We are going on a short break after this, but we will appreciate your continuous support, so please consider subscribing. It really motivates us, and we will see you next time.